Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have a single series by the name of the North Carolina Sandwalker. I hope you all enjoy it. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 1,200 likes on this one. Liking the video only takes a quick second, and it helps out with the algorithm immensely. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post videos just like this one every Tuesday, with the exception of this week because I'm running behind schedule. I do have a regular 2-hour video almost completely done for this next Tuesday though, so I hope you all enjoy that as well. Anyways, sit back, grab a coffee, pack a bowl, whatever it is that you do to relax. Enjoy, tell someone you love them, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. Okay, so never done one of these before, so bear with me. My thoughts are kind of scattered. This happened a few months ago, though, so I've had some time to figure out how to explain this. But let me give some background. Me and my friend group from high school go on a trip every summer to some place. One year we got a lake house for a week. The next a penthouse in the city, but this year we got a beach house in North Carolina. I changed the names, but there's me, Griffin, DJ, and then there's Kylie, Maddie, and Claire. We all sort of went our own ways in college, grew up a bit, and changed. This trip every summer always brought us back together. So this was our third trip, and we just finished our junior year of college. We got to the house and it was sick. We practically had our own beach because the closest houses were like half a mile on either side. It was a super awesome spot, and we were all excited that we didn't have to worry about noise complaints or anything. We promptly got changed and made our way to the beach. Griffin and Maddie hung back to make us frozen drinks. We're pretty sure they're hooking up. Not important. I just wanted to add it cause Griffin sometimes reads this kind of stuff. But yeah, they hung back, and when they came down to the beach, we got plastered. Looking back, putting the frat boy and party girl in charge of making us drinks wasn't a good call, but dang, were those drinks strong. So we all got super drunk and had a pretty solid day at the beach. About an hour or two into chilling, DJ goes, "Wanna grab the spike ball?" "Why? You want me to give you the smoke?" Griffin said this, then spilled his drink while laughing at his own joke. "Ah, shit, it's on my pants." Then he ran in the ocean. DJ and I went back to the house to grab the lacrosse sticks he brought and the spike ball net. We got to the house and grabbed the sticks and stuff from the car. That's when we heard the most blood-curdling scream we've ever heard. I know it's cliche, but I genuinely felt the hairs on my arms stand up straight. DJ and I looked at each other, and he started in a full-on sprint to the beach. I guess he assumed it was one of the girls and wanted to see what happened in case something went down. I followed. Once we got over the dunes, we saw Griffin running to us. DJ asked, "Bro, what happened?" "What do you mean? That wasn't you guys?" Griffin asked, confused. "No, we thought it was you guys." We all just sort of stood there and scanned the area. After walking around the perimeter for a bit, we went back to the beach and tried to play it off, but we made sure to keep an eye out for whatever made that noise. We ended up chalking it up to being a fox or something. DJ was a hunter, and said it was plausible, so that's all the explanation we needed, and we got right back to drinking and messing around. It did kind of kill the vibe though, so we packed up after 30 or so minutes, and went back to the house. We all went to our respective beds/couch for post-beach and drinking naps. We woke up an hour or two later, and continued our day. Honestly, the rest of the night was pretty normal. We just sort of hung out, played some drinking games, and hung out. But when we woke up the next morning, we realized we wouldn't be able to have another beach day, as it was torrential downpouring outside. All that really meant was the drinking and smoking would be taking place inside today. We were pretty much split half and half. Me, Griffin, and Maddie were drinking while DJ, Claire, and Kylie were getting high. As the day went on, the rain got worse, and we got more messed up, which is why when Claire and Kylie said they heard something outside, we figured it was just them being paranoid and freaked out from the storm. But after they insisted on it not being the weed or rain, we set our designated tough guys, Griffin and DJ, to check it out. After about 10 or so minutes, they came back soaking wet and out of breath. We asked them if they saw anything, and then they explained that they were just doing a lap around the house and talking shit when they saw something moving by the dunes. They called out, but whatever it was just went deeper into the dunes. So they head over, but when they got there, they couldn't find whatever it was. So after looking for a bit, they gave up and came back. This sort of creeped us out, but they assured us it was fine, and it was probably just an animal or the wind or something. Everyone else relaxed a bit, but I was more skeptical. After 8+ years of friendship, you pick up on subtle speech patterns and stuff like that. And I could tell when DJ said this, he was trying to make us calm down. I pulled DJ aside and asked him about it alone, but all he said was, "Listen, man, I don't know what it was, but we're all good. Odds are it was just a deer and Griffin just had one too many." I honestly agreed. Griffin, well, I love him, is not the most reliable source, especially while drunk. As the day went on, we just hung out and tried to wait out the rain, which didn't work because it went on until it was dark out. We ended up playing a drinking game in the living room. It was something called spoons, but that's not important. What is important is that after playing for a bit, we heard what we thought were people outside. It sounded like they were playing music and talking and all that. It was like they were having a party. We all looked at each other confused. Kylie went, "I thought there was no one else around." "There isn't," I answered. "Who's out there?" Griffin and DJ stood up. DJ grabbed a lacrosse stick, and Griffin grabbed a flashlight. I was going to let them handle it, but after the girls looked at me, as I just sat there, I felt guilty, so I got up too. All I had was a pocket knife I always kept on me. I guess my role was moral support, as if there were people outside and we had a confrontation. DJ and Griffin would be our main assets. I just sort of followed them as they walked around the house. Like an idiot in a horror movie, Griffin shouted, "Who's out there?" and then shined his flashlight across the dunes. This time I saw it. We couldn't make out what it was, but it looked like something was moving. DJ and Griffin looked at each other and take off towards it. I was hesitant, but I followed as well. But when we got to the dunes, there was nothing. No people, no footprints, nothing. Nothing on the beach, no sign of anything being there. We looked around for a bit but couldn't find anything, so we went back to the house and locked the doors, and turned on all the outside lights. We slowed down on the drinking and all just sort of sat there. The girls kept asking what was out there, but just had to explain there was nothing, which they found annoying. What was weird is how this affected the vibe. We never had any problems, hardly had any fights in our group, but now everyone was on edge. Kylie and Maddie, who have been best friends since they were 6, weren't talking. Claire, who is our resident chill stoner, was paranoid as heck. So I figured the girls were just freaked out, but when Griffin was acting off too, I knew something was wrong. Griffin was one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Always cracking jokes, always smiling. He was stone cold, looking out the window at nothing, fists balled like he was ready to fight. DJ, on the other hand, was drinking, way more than usual. I was also distant, just not involved in what was happening, like everything was in a fog and I couldn't connect to the conversation. I figured it was best for me to bring this up. I'm not usually one to speak up about stuff, but I just had to say something. Guys, we gotta stop. There's nothing out there. Let's just relax, okay? And have some fun? They all just looked at me, and like that, they snapped out of it. Like nothing had even happened. It's like they came out of a trance or something, and then bam, we were having fun again. We quickly got back into the swing of things and kept drinking. But there was still some tension between everyone. I decided to throw on some music to hopefully alleviate the awkwardness. This actually did help a bit. The mood was a bit better. Griffin started cracking jokes again. The girls were talking again. It was going pretty well. Sadly, because of how well things were going, we didn't realize that DJ had left. He just up and walked out. We were lost in our conversations until we were all cut off by another blood-curdling scream. We all went silent. We were frozen. Something was different about this scream. It was closer. That's when Claire broke the silence. Wait, where's DJ? We all looked around the room. Nothing. We ran through the house. Nothing. Then all of a sudden, Griffin went into superhero mode. He grabbed one of the lacrosse sticks left on the table and practically ran through the door. He didn't seem to care about the potential danger. I, on the other hand, was more scared of what could be out there. But I couldn't just let Griffin go out there by himself, so I grabbed a flashlight and followed. We ran for only 30 or so seconds yelling out for DJ. We didn't get a response. Only thing out there was the beach and the ocean. We made it to the beach, but were stopped in our tracks by a low, deafening sound. The closest thing I could relate to it would be like a tugboat horn. It felt like how it feels when you hear fireworks and get that hit to your chest. It lasted only 10 or so seconds, but those 10 seconds blew. I shined my flashlight out into the ocean, but we didn't see anything besides a buoy floating 50 or so yards out. I looked at Griffin. He was mad. Stick close to me. Then he breaks off in a jog down the beach. He's scanning back and forth looking for any sign of DJ. We made it to another set of dunes, then he stopped. I stopped too and looked at him. He went from pissed to terrified. Turn off the light. I'm obviously pretty confused, but then I follow his gaze and see it. I don't really know how to describe it. It was like a giant moving mound of sand or something. It was shaped like someone made a sculpture of a human out of sand. I honestly don't know. It had 2 arms, 2 legs, had a head-like thing, but it was more of a dome that sat on top. And it was covered with scattered rocks and seaweed. I fell back in fear. I genuinely couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The flashlight got buried in the sand, and that just made it harder to make out what this thing was. I don't think I really understood how big this thing was. I was just mesmerized by it. And more accurately, terrified. Then I realized it was getting closer to us. Griffin stood there motionless. He followed it with his eyes, but he too was frozen. While it was getting closer, it wasn't walking towards us. It was walking past us with no purpose or urgency, like it was just going for a stroll on the beach. It walked sluggishly, like it was dragging its legs in the sand. It wasn't until it was right next to us, I mean like 15 or so feet away from us, that I realized how big it was. Griffin is just over 6 feet tall and is pretty built. He looked like a child next to this thing. It had to be almost double his height and twice as wide. It dwarfed him. Then it looked at us. I could tell because it turned its head towards us where I saw 2 divots in the sand. I'm guessing those were its eyes. That was when a mouth formed. It opened up like a puppet and out came a muffled and echoed, "Why? You want me to give you the smoke? Oh shit, it's on my pants." It was Griffin's voice. I looked up at Griffin and saw that tears began to roll down his face, but he still couldn't move. "What?" These words were broken up by Griffin trying not to burst out in a sobbing, crying fight. The thing kept walking past us. Then another voice came out of it. It was DJ. "Calm down, man. You're good. Just relax. You're fine. Just breathe." This must have provoked Griffin enough that he could muster up all the courage to speak. Quietly, I heard him ask, Where is he?" The sand thing turned and looked at us. It then lifted one of its arms in the direction it came from as if it was pointing. Then it continued walking. We didn't move. It just kept playing these sounds. There were seagulls, waves crashing, rain, anything you could think of that you might hear on the beach it had copied and was just repeating. I also noticed that despite it dragging its feet in the sand, it didn't leave a trail. The only thing it left behind was the occasional piece of seaweed or rock that fell off its body. We watched it go to the dune, grab a handful of grass and shove it in its mouth, then keep walking. Eventually, after it was over 100 or so feet away, I slowly got up and approached Griffin. He was still messed up, but snapped out of it when I said, "We've got to go find DJ." We wandered down the beach, and eventually, after looking for 10 minutes, we found him unconscious in the sand. He didn't seem to be hurt, no bruises or anything like that. So me and Griffin picked him up and carried him back to the house. We were pretty cautious not to run into that thing again, despite it not actually doing anything to us. We didn't want to risk it. We made it back to the house and put DJ down on the couch. Then we had to explain what just happened to the girls. I honestly wasn't sure where to start, and Griffin didn't even really want to talk about it. But we really didn't have to because DJ woke up. And the first thing he said was that real?" Me and Griffin instantly knew what he was talking about. Griffin spoke up, but only said, "Yeah." I had to ask, "Did it hurt you?" DJ was shaken and trying to collect his thoughts. Can't blame him. He went, "No. I went for a walk to try and calm down. Then that thing showed up and, waved at me." "What thing?" Claire was getting annoyed. We didn't care and kept listening to DJ. Then it offered me a bunch of seaweed. That's pretty much all I remember. "What are you guys talking about?" Kylie was also getting annoyed. Then we started to explain the whole situation. They didn't believe us. To be fair, it is a lot to hear and pretty hard to believe, but we were getting pissed off that they didn't believe it. Then, almost on cue, we heard us. Like from outside, that thing started playing me and Griffin calling out, DJ, dude, where are you?" The girls went over to the window. We locked the doors, as if locking the door would stop that thing if it wanted to get in here. They said they didn't see anything, but pulled the blinds down. We left the next morning. We honestly didn't really talk about it much. The car ride home was pretty quiet. We only talked about this a handful of times. Once was when we all got together over Thanksgiving break. This was when DJ told us why he really went out for his walk that night. He said he needed to find out what was in the dunes, and that it just didn't make sense. So he dipped when no one was looking because he didn't want to sound weird. Then he said he started getting paranoid and had a panic attack. The other time was actually last night. I was on Xbox with Griffin and around 1 a.m. just started spilling about how he hasn't really stopped thinking about it, and now he wants to go back. I also want to go back. That thing wasn't malicious. It almost seemed helpful from what we saw and what DJ said. If we go back, I'll update you guys, but yeah, I just wanted to tell someone about it because right now, it's pretty much just our group that knows. So yeah, thanks, I guess. Oh, and by the way, DJ had a good name for this thing. He called it the Sandwalker. Okay, so I guess, hey again. If you read my last post, you understand that stuff sort of went down over the summer. If you haven't read my last post, well, I guess the best way to explain it is that stuff sort of went down over the summer. I'll link it here. Honestly, you'll be pretty lost, so I kinda recommend reading it. Long story short, saw a giant thing on the beach. It made some weird sounds, and we left. What I'm writing right now is picking up just about 2 weeks ago. After about a few days of me and Griffin texting DJ trying to convince him to come with us back to North Carolina, somehow we eventually got through to him. Which, I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting, at all. Out of all of us, he seemed to be the most freaked out by the whole situation. To be fair, we were all pretty shaken up. I didn't really hide my emotions too well, but compared to DJ, I was doing just fine. Pretty much every time we brought up the whole situation, he would just sort of shut down. It really messed with him. But I guess he was also the one who was most intrigued by it. Despite how we all felt about the situation, and how terrified we may have been, it was unanimous that we had to go back to confirm what we saw. The whole trip was pretty short notice. By December 7th, we had decided to go, and by the 9th, we had the house booked. We were even able to get the same house as last time. I mean, it wasn't like we were fighting with other renters to get a hold of it. Not too many people are trying to rent a beach house in mid-December. Not to mention, since it was the off-season, the price was lower, which meant we were able to afford to just go with the 3 of us. We all decided to leave the girls behind because, 1, we didn't want them to get freaked out any more than they already were, and 2, they never even saw the Sandwalker, so in reality, they didn't really have much to do with it. Not to mention it was unanimously agreed upon that none of us wanted to get the girls involved just in case anything happened. My dad dropped me off at Griffin's house the morning of the 14th. I got there around the same time as DJ, and after Griffin's parents made us some breakfast, we were on the road. Griffin pretty much always had a smirk on his face and practically dripped confidence. The smirk was there. The confidence was not. It was almost like he was putting on a facade to hide something. I can only assume that something he was hiding was fear. DJ had a different method of dealing with his anxiety. His eyes were locked on the road and he remained quiet for the majority of the drive. I wanted to chalk this up to him being focused on the road, but I knew he was mentally preparing himself for the days to come. I tried to break the silence by playing some music. At most, this helped drown out the awkwardness that had engulfed the car. After the 2-hour mark, it seemed we had settled in and DJ finally started talking. So, how's school been? It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Luckily, this was all that was needed to get Griffin on a tangent about one of his funny yet somehow bizarre college stories. This kickstarted what was a relatively normal car ride. Eventually, we pulled into the driveway of the house and began to unload the car. It wasn't until this moment that I realized just how much each of us was affected by our encounter this last summer, and how each of us had approached this trip in our own unique ways. DJ had unloaded his 3 bags, his backpack, his suitcase, and then a duffel bag filled with guns. Unlike last time where DJ had packed a spike ball net and lacrosse sticks, he must have decided that if anything were to happen this time, he would be prepared. I shifted my gaze to the left and watched Griffin swing a case of water over one shoulder and his 2 bags over his other. It was here that I realized his idea of prepping for this trip was to put on as much muscle as possible. Just in the few weeks since Thanksgiving, he had grown significantly larger. I, on the other hand, had spent my time researching different mythology, zoology, and cryptozoology. It seemed we had all played to our strengths to get ready for our return to the beach. DJ with his history of hunting, Griffin with his physicality, and me with my... I don't know. Being a nerd, I guess. You get the point. We all grabbed our stuff from the car and then just sort of stood there. All of us looked out towards the beach. All of us, presumably, replaying the events of our summer vacation. The atmosphere was almost identical to the last day of our previous trip. Cloudy, looked like it was about to rain, and nothing but the sound of waves crashing and seagulls chirping. The sound of the beach ambience was broken when DJ said, "Come on, let's go," and then made his way inside. I went with shortly after, and then after a few more moments of waiting, Griffin followed as well. We unpacked our things, and after settling in, we went out trying to get some information from the locals. Unfortunately, we didn't seem to think that almost all of the houses would be empty on account of the majority of them being summer homes. After a little over an hour of going door to door looking for someone, the sun began to set and we settled on going back to the house before we lost daylight entirely. By the time we got back to the house, it was about 4 in the afternoon. After getting back to the house, it was decided that we would go to this diner/barbecue place we passed on the way there for dinner. Since we didn't have any luck talking to locals in the surrounding houses, we figured this would give us a chance to maybe get some more information. We also used this as an excuse to delay the inevitable of going back onto the beach. Griffin drove us there, and after getting seated, we realized just how dead this town really was during the off-season. There were only 8 people in the whole restaurant, 3 of which were us. We ordered, and had all decided that it would be best if we wait to ask about the thing we saw over the summer until after getting our food. Sadly, the waitress wanted nothing to do with our questions. I guess she disliked the topic so much it prompted her to bring out the busboy to make sure after finishing our food and paying we got out immediately. So we ate our food, left the cash on the table, and were escorted out. Before practically throwing us from the barbecue joint, the busboy, who was more of a bus man, standing about a foot over myself, said a bit of information that actually was of some value. "Listen, I know what you boys are talking about. Just drop it. It ain't worth the trouble you're gonna get in." I don't think those were his exact words, but this is close enough. The weird thing is, he didn't say this as a threat. He said it as advice. Like he was looking out for us. Like this has happened before. After returning to the house, we contemplated what to do. It was eventually decided that we would ignore the man's advice and continue on with what we came to do. We rested for only about an hour. Then as we all sat there in the living room, I watched as the clock went from 8:59 to 9. It was officially as dark as it was going to get, with only the moon lighting up the beach. I looked up at Griffin and DJ. They were just sitting there staring at the guns on the table. I guess I had to be the one to initiate stuff now. So, against better judgment, I mustered up a, "You guys ready?" They both lifted their heads to look at me. Griffin had a forced smile on his face. DJ was deadpan, ready to go. There were 3 guns on the table, 1 shotgun, 1 rifle, and 1 handgun. I would go into the specifics, but that is genuinely all I know. DJ had given me and Griffin a quick rundown to how to shoot guns in an open field we passed on the drive down to the house. Plus, he had taken us shooting back in high school when we stole one of his dad's hunting rifles. DJ didn't want us going into this without knowing how to use our guns, so this little bit of shooting practice we underwent was the best we could do for the time being. DJ took the rifle because he was the best shot out of the 3 of us. Griffin took the handgun, and I took the shotgun. Griffin also insisted on bringing a baseball bat there he kept in his backpack, as he wasn't a huge fan of guns. Honestly, I'm not sure of what he planned to do with this, but whatever made him feel better, I guess. It had been discussed previously that we weren't here to hunt the Sandwalker, but just observe and, if we're lucky, get a picture. But the guns were our contingency plan. Along with the guns, we each had flashlights on us, and Griffin even had his GoPro strapped to his chest. We all looked at each other and knew it was time to go out there. The cold air flooded into the house as we opened the door to the porch and looked out onto the beach. This gave nothing but the sound of waves crashing and wind blowing. The only thing was we couldn't even tell if it was authentic or if it was being replayed by that thing, and I won't bore you with the details because there are none. We were on that beach from 9 until midnight, and there was nothing. No monster, no weird sounds, absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. This, for lack of a better term, made us mad. It made us feel crazy, made us question what we had all seen. We decided we'd go back to the house and try again the next night. We didn't get that chance though, because on the way back as we walked through the sand, we heard the roaring of engines. Initially, we all thought it was the Sandwalker, until we saw the lights emitting from headlights fastly approaching. We all assumed that these were cops, which prompted DJ to dig his gun license out of his pocket, and also had us begin to hide the other 2 guns in Griffin's backpack. As the lights approached, we realized these weren't cops. They were just regular people, all brandishing guns. We fished the guns out of the bag and stood there waiting. The 3 ATVs were followed by a dune buggy. In total, I counted 7 men, all of which were armed. They got within 15 or so feet of us when they let up on the throttles and the engines died down. There were a few seconds of a stare down between us and the men. Within these seconds, there was nothing but silence. This silence was cut off by a familiar voice saying, "Oh, these guys again?" I turned my gaze to face the voice and noticed that the man who was talking was the same busboy from earlier. "These are the city boys I was talking about." "We're not from the city." Griffin was interrupted by one of the men. Despite this being a beach town with a population that was made up of relatively normal suburban people, these men were different. These men were rugged, more calloused. You could tell just from looking at them. They weren't just regular people who lived in a beach town. The best way I could describe it is that they were more outdoorsy than the rest of us. "What the hell are you boys doing out here?" One of the men said this as he held his gun. He didn't hold it towards us, but he was ready to fire at a moment's notice. "Don't tell me you're trying to hunt that thing." The busboy spoke up once again, with a few guns and a baseball bat. I decided, since it was originally my plan to come back, that I should be the one to speak up. "We're not trying to hunt it. We just wanted to know what we saw." The following 10 or so minutes were filled with us arguing back and forth, mainly consisting of us 3 leaving for our own safety. Throughout these arguments, we luckily were able to gain some semi-valuable information. This was more than we expected to get when we traveled house to house looking for locals to interview. There were 3 main things we gained from this conversation. The first was that every year, this thing procreates, and that their litters can consist of anywhere between 10 to 20 pups. The second thing we learned was that the older these things get, the more docile and tranquil they become, only coming out every few nights when no one is around, eating whatever plants are readily available. The third thing we learned was more disturbing. The Sandwalker, while docile in its older age, is incredibly hostile and aggressive in its younger years. While its more mature counterpart is herbivorous, the diet in their earlier years consists of anything they can get their hands on, including animals, and in the rare case, people. This is where the hunters we had run into come into play. They were equipped with enough guns and bullets to take out a small army, and it became abundantly clear to us it was because they planned on taking out an entire litter of sandwalkers. They said they did this to protect their own. Apparently, if these things ever got out and began to wreak havoc, as one of the men put it, the tourism in their town would plummet and the lives of a lot of people would be ruined. So every year they would take out the freshest batch of sandwalkers. The three of us stood there, confused and processing what we had just learned. We tried to digest the information, but it was too much. "You had an encounter with the big one?" one of the bigger guys asked. We assumed that he was their leader because of how he positioned himself in the front of the group, and how his voice carried a sort of authority with each word he said. DJ spoke up. "Yeah, just sort of..." His voice trailed off and he grew silent. Griffin then took over as he realized DJ was shutting down once again like he always did when the subject was brought up. "It's a long story, but with you guys hunting, the cops ever get calls about gunfire and stuff?" The leader just sort of chuckled. "Well, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Blake. People call me Chief 'cause, well, I'm the chief." He pulled out his badge and flashed it to us. I don't know much about the police badges, but I'm pretty sure you can't just acquire one, so this dude was legit. "You boys ever shoot before?" DJ snapped out of it. "Been hunting since I was 10. "You two?" the chief asked. I'm still unsure of why, but Griffin lied to the man and told him we had a decent amount of experience with guns. Despite this, the chief instructed one of the men to get us off the beach and back to the streets to make sure we were all good. The busboy hopped from his ATV and offered to take us back. But before we could even get a few feet from the group, we were distracted by a sound. It sounded like a boat blowing its horn. We all directed our attention to the ocean, but even with our flashlights, all 11 of us were shining them across the horizon, but none of us saw anything. There was an eerie familiarity of this exact feeling, the feeling of looking out to find the sound of a boat, but being met with nothing. This instantly sent a chill down my spine. Then suddenly, the sound grew. It no longer was just one horn, but like a symphony of trumpets. It seemed almost as if a bunch of car horns were going off at once, like rush hour traffic. Then I remembered the sound we had heard a few months before. It was the tugboat horn. I froze. I was absolutely paralyzed and stuck staring at Griffin and DJ. They too were frozen with fear. The mental prepping, the gun collecting, the muscle building, the monster research, everything we had all done to get ready for this trip seemed futile, as we were all overtaken with fear. I was eventually able to turn myself around, and I then saw the chief yelling, but I wasn't fully able to make out the words. It was obvious that the other men were able to hear his orders as 4 of them promptly lit their flares they had pulled from their bags and threw them into various spots of the beach. This provided enough light for us to see 15 or so miniature sandwalkers closing in on us. I say miniature, but these things ranged anywhere between 3 to 7 feet tall. They were slightly faster than the one we encountered over the summer, but still relatively slow. While we stood there staring at them, the chief scrambled to us and rushed us into the dune buggy. He pulled my ear to his mouth and yelled, "Stay up there and get ready." Then, all hell broke loose. Each one of them opened fire. The flares resting in the sand grew obsolete because of how much the muzzle fire lit up the beach. The sound of the tugboat horn switched from a low rumble to a more screeching cry. Originally, I mistook this as a cry of pain, but I quickly realized that it was actually a battle cry of sorts. DJ hopped off the buggy and began to do what he could in order to help. Me and Griffin, on the other hand, were still in total shock. I guess DJ's experience with hunting had prepared him for this kind of stuff because he had some sort of instinct neither Griffin nor I possessed. I still could barely move. My hands shook with fear and my palms were cold with sweat. I turned my head to Griffin, whose mouth was hung open and eyes wide with awe. My gaze then shifted to DJ, whose face displayed a different kind of expression. His eyes narrowed and his teeth were gritted. He had taken his fear and turned it to rage. I tried to keep count on how many bullets it took to take just a single one of them down. The most I counted was around 50. The least I counted was around 20. There was the rare occasion where one of the pups got too close to one of the men, and they would all shift their fire to focus the approaching threat. Their synchronized fire and organized demeanor made it obvious that they had done this many times previous to tonight. After 10 minutes of non-stop gunfire, it finally began to die down. Once muzzle fire stopped, the beach became illuminated by the low red glow produced by the flares that had now become slightly suppressed by sand that had been kicked up from stray bullets. With a call from the chief, 4 of the men then began gathering the bodies and dragging them to form a pile. They did this while the busboy doused them in gasoline. The chief then walked up to us and said something to the effect of, "Sorry about that. Didn't expect them to come out so early. Guess we got them excited." He laughed as he said this and then lit a cigarette. Then he made some joke about how we had probably never hunted anything like that before. Honestly, I don't know what exactly happened because of how my eardrums were filled with what I can only describe as the roar of war. It was the gunfire, the screaming, the sound of the battle that had just been fought. The strangest part about all this sound was that it somehow managed to be even louder than before. Despite us all being in the center of it, the sound was so powerful that it genuinely forced me to the ground. As I sat in the sand with my back pressed against the buggy, I plugged my ears. Even then, I was unable to escape the sound of gunfire. I looked up and realized even the chief was stunned. He winced as he covered his ears. We all turned our gaze to the direction of the sound. That's when we saw it, the silhouette of the Sandwalker. This was the supposedly docile and peaceful mature version, who at that moment was charging us. Well, I still wouldn't consider its pace fast by any means. It was significantly faster than what I had witnessed over the summer. We could barely make it out, but it couldn't be anything else. There was a gap in the roar of mimicked gunfire, and in that moment I could hear the chief mutter the words, "What the hell?" The cigarette that hung from his mouth dropped to the sand, which promptly ignited the trail of gasoline that had unknowingly been building as the busboy too was frozen with fear. Within seconds, the pile of corpses erupted into flames. The stench filled our noses, and the flames illuminated the beach. With these growing flames, we could finally clearly see this Goliath charging us. It was maybe 20 yards away, but it was gaining speed. Guns were drawn and 2 men quickly opened fire once again. But unlike the pups, this one didn't go down as quickly. The 7 hunters, 8 including DJ, were blasting bullets into this thing, one after another. There wasn't a second where it wasn't being pierced with someone's shot. Despite this, it didn't stop. It hardly even slowed down. Stray fragments of sand and rock sprayed from the Sandwalker, with each bullet hit, but it seemed to just be filled in with some sort of the excess it carried upon its body. I was in such a panic from the gunfire that I hadn't realized where exactly the Sandwalker was running to. Its path was lined up with the ignited pile of Sandwalkers. in front of which was DJ, who stood firing his rifle from atop the ATV. Griffin must have caught on to this because suddenly, he drew his gun from his holster and began rushing to DJ. As he ran, he frantically fired into the approaching beast. I quickly realized that the few bullets from Griffin wouldn't be nearly enough to do any harm. I too tried to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I was still paralyzed with fear, and the roar of gunfire was still being matched with the cry of the monster. It didn't matter that I couldn't move, though, because once I finally got myself to move, the Sandwalker finally reached them. Griffin stood there clicking his gun that had already run out of ammo. Griffin reached back and in a single motion pulled his bat and swung as hard as he could into the monster. It didn't even flinch. It hardly acknowledged him. Griffin drew back once again and his face donned a furious expression of rage. I watched as the Sandwalker haphazardly swung its arm into Griffin, which flung him through the air. He flew 30 or so feet where he landed somewhere in the dunes. Griffin's attempt, while futile, gave DJ enough time to fire his final 2 shots into its head. Those 2 well-placed shots did stun the beast, but within seconds DJ too was launched by a single blow from the Sandwalker's arm. Watching my friends, both of which I consider brothers, both of which were men more equipped to deal with a threat of any scale, being manhandled by this thing set something off in me. It was only at this moment that I realized we really could be killed by this thing, and that prompted me to open fire. I began shooting, round after round. I can still feel how much the shotgun shot back into me, and how much it hurt each time it slammed against my shoulder. But my shots only seemed to get its attention as it then changed its attention from my 2 friends to me, and the rest of the hunters. The men continued to fire, and so did I. After the butt of the shotgun stopped firing back into my body, I realized I had run out of bullets and began stumbling backwards away from the approaching beast. I hadn't been keeping count, but at this point, 100 rounds had to have been fired into it. Luckily, in its frenzy, the Sandwalker had stumbled into the flames, which distracted it momentarily and allowed for a few of the men to get a couple clean shots. This must have inflicted enough damage to provoke some sort of fight or flight within it, which forced it to retreat. As it then began moving down the beach, all of the men stood there, eyes wide, and guns following the trail left as it ran. What I just described may seem like it was a lengthy ordeal, but in reality, I imagine it lasted no more than 30 seconds from the time we saw the grown Sandwalker charging us to the time it began to retreat. As we all stood there, Griffin came stumbling down the dunes, clutching his stomach in pain. Hanging loosely from his torso was his now shattered GoPro. 2 of the hunters ran to DJ and helped him to the dune buggy as he too clutched his torso. Nobody said anything. It was silent for minutes as we all tried to collect our thoughts on what just happened. The smell of the burning corpses was now replaced with the scent of gunpowder. The flares that once lit the beach were now almost completely buried by sand. We could only see what the fire and the lights of the ATVs illuminated. We didn't wait for the sun to rise. After a few words with the men, we just packed our stuff and left. The ride back was quiet, even more so than the ride there. I drove this time as DJ lied in the back seat. Griffin and I let him sleep as he seemed to catch the brunt of the damage. Luckily, the only injuries we sustained were a few bruised ribs for DJ, the wind knocked out of Griffin, and the bruise on my shoulder. I pulled over at a rest stop to grab some drinks and used the bathroom about 2 hours into the drive. When I entered the bathroom after paying for my water, I caught a glimpse of Griffin staring at himself in the mirror. I was able to notice it momentarily during my occasional glance over at him while driving, but it became clear while looking at him in the glare at his reflection that he had been drained of every ounce of his frat boy charisma. And had now displayed a deadpan and defeated expression. I said the only thing I could think could possibly give him any semblance of hope. We didn't die, and we're not going back. Griffin gave a half smile, turned, and hugged me. Once we made it back to the car, we gave DJ pain meds and some snacks purchased from the rest stop. We got back to Griffin's house at 8 a.m., and I was back at my home by 8:30. When I got back, I stood in my shower for 30 minutes and just ran over what we had just gone through. I was mainly worried about how Griffin and DJ were doing. As I stepped from the shower, I looked at my phone and saw a text message from DJ in our group chat. It read, "Screw the Sandwalker," and "Screw North Carolina." This was followed by a text from Griffin. "We messed that thing up. Love you boys." Screw the Sandwalker, and screw North Carolina.